We have a very interesting report that is coming out by an NFL insider. The Las Vegas Raiders are apparently considering drafting an offensive tackle with the 6th overall pick. This is coming out by a legit NFL insider in Tony Pelini. He is basically putting it out there that the Las Vegas Raiders are seriously considering drafting offensive tackle Armand Membou at pick 6. I want to talk about what this means for the Raiders, and we're going to get into the actual report of what this guy said. But I think it's important to recognize that, when you look at this class right here, there's not a ton of great offensive tackles. There's not a ton of starting, day one caliber guys. Like, for example, last year, you had guys like Joe Alt and Olu Fashanu who you knew you can plug and play as day one starters. You had guys, even the year before that, Darnell Wright was a day one starter. There's not a lot of guys like that in this class, right? You have Armand Membou, who I think is probably the only day one starting tackle. Josh Simmons has a ton of upside from at Ohio State, but he was hurt last season. So I think that kind of is going to, put it up in the air of, is he ready to be a day one starter at offensive tackle? At the same time, I don't even think Josh Simmons is 100% the player he could potentially be in 5 years. And I think if you're drafting him, you're drafting him on potential a little bit as well. Membou is completely different, right? You're drafting Membou because he has the best tape among the offensive tackles in this class, right? And it's not close. Like, Armand Membou has the arm length to play offensive tackle, and he has the tape as well to play offensive tackle. And there's no tape you will find of this guy struggling. You can't say the same with some of the other guys, right? Like, Will Campbell has a lot of tape where he struggled. We know the arm length is a concern, and he struggled getting outreached by guys like Landon Jackson out of Arkansas. A couple other guys were able to beat him up as well. To me, Membou's the guy that if the Raiders do draft an offensive tackle, I'd be 100% in on. Now, I want to show you guys some of what Tony Pelini said exactly, because I think it is interesting. So he put this report out there specifically yesterday. It was actually earlier today that he posted it, where he just talked about a ton of insider notes that he kind of has heard from the NFL draft regarding some of the top prospects. In this, he says that multiple sources have told him that Abdul Carter will likely be the 2nd overall pick. And then he kind of gets into the Raiders. He says, likewise, just about everyone has mocked running back Ashton Jeanty to the Las Vegas Raiders at pick 6. Yet, I'm told the team will seriously consider Missouri offensive tackle Armand Membou with that choice. With John Spytek being the team's new general manager and a need to upgrade the offensive line, sources tell me Spytek will lean towards Membou, considering the success he had with Tristan Wirfs in Tampa Bay. Many I've spoken with feel that Membou will be the first offensive lineman selected in the draft ahead of Will Campbell. First and foremost, I agree 100% with what Tony Pelini is basically saying, right? Armand Membou will be the first offensive tackle. He'd be the first overall offensive lineman. You're not generally drafting a center or guard in the top 10 anyways. And I do think Membou is the best offensive lineman in this class, specifically at the offensive tackle position. And I also don't think there's any, I don't think it's close. I think he's a lot better than Will Campbell. I don't even have Will Campbell as my 2nd offensive tackle, right? If I'm saying Will Campbell's a starting offensive tackle, I'd probably have 3 or 4 guys ahead of him, right? I think the Las Vegas Raiders would be very, very smart to take a guy like Armand Membou with that pick. And I think it kind of just goes back to the DJ Glaze conversation as well. You guys know how I feel about Glaze. You guys know how I feel about how I felt about Thayer Munford as well, right? I said that I don't see enough from Thayer Munford to show that this guy's our starting tackle long term, right? And a lot of people were saying he's the franchise guy for the Raiders, right? A lot of people were saying that. And I think we quickly learned that he was not the franchise guy, right? And I think we also learned that a rookie was able to beat him out and kind of take over that job. And another thing that's kind of important to note is, you could compare the tapes of DJ Glaze in college to Armand Membou in college, and there's no comparison. Membou's a much, much, much better player on tape from their final years in college, and I think that's going to also translate into the NFL. Now, I'm not 100% out on DJ Glaze, right? I don't think, DJ Glaze looked better his rookie year than Thayer Munford's ever looked, to me, right? So, with that, yes, there's upside with DJ Glaze. He may develop into a starting tackle, but there's also a chance he doesn't. And if he doesn't, you might not ever be in position where you're at right now, where Armand Membou is a starting tackle. He's a franchise guy. I can guarantee you guys right now, I said this about Christian Darrisaw. I said this about Darnell Wright. And I'll say it about Armand Membou. These guys are going to all be, and I said it about the other 2 guys in the past, they'll be top 10 tackles. And they are that, both of those guys. And I think with Armand Membou, he'll also be a top 10 tackle pretty quickly. And chances are he's going to end up being that as well. And again, I just think for the Raiders, if the alternative is that DJ Glaze doesn't pan out and then you pass on Armand Membou, And, don't get it wrong. If you go with Ashton Genty, if you go with Travis Hunter, there's nothing wrong with that. I'd be okay with that as well. But I just think that for the Raiders, there is going to be a time when Colt Miller does retire, right? And we need to just have that future kind of locked in. Miller turns 30 this season, right? So, just long-term thinking, I think the Raiders have to lock in that franchise tackle or at least bring a guy in. And Membou makes the most sense to me. His tape does, kind of speak for itself. And again, the report that the Raiders are seriously considering Membou, I'd be 100% in with that as the guy for the Raiders. The tape checks out. Very, very solid, very fluid. The guy has the advanced techniques, right? Like he'll snatch a guy. He'll change up his pass sets, right? There are things that not every offensive tackle can do. And then, of course, the number one trait is movement, and he moves really, really, really well. And he's smart as well, right? Just everything about this guy is top tier. I'd be 100% in on it. We'll see what actually ends up happening. There was actually another thing that I was kind of put out there that I want to talk about a little bit. A Raiders insider shifted his draft projection for Shedeur Sanders and the Raiders at pick 6. And this is specifically Vincent Monsignor, who said something specific, and I actually do kind of agree with it. And I want to just kind of show you guys what this guy said, because I do think it's something we have to realistically think about. Vincent Monsignor said that, "I have a feeling that this might be the Raiders' fortunate draft. Lucky day where you don't have to trade up and you don't have to mortgage your future. The way things are kind of lining up with some dominant players at the top of this draft this year, the generational players that the Tennessee Titans' new general manager doesn't want to pass up on. I think there's an actual chance that Shedeur Sanders is going to drop to number 6, and the Raiders are going to stand pat and wait for Shedeur to drop, the great young quarterback from the University of Colorado, to fall to them." You guys, if you guys have watched me long enough, you guys know how I feel about Shedeur, right? I was very critical of him back in November, December, January, super critical. I said, I don't think this guy's the QB1 in this class. I think we're at the point where most people agree with that, right? Cam Ward is now the QB1. But with Shedeur, he's definitely seen his stock fall a lot, right? And it's to the point where this guy, I think realistically, he will be there with pick 6, given that the other teams that are quarterback needy have kind of already, they've already kind of made their decision with the quarterback position, right? You look at a team like, the Titans will draft the quarterback with the first overall pick. The Browns have a quarterback in Deshaun Watson. The Giants brought in 2 different quarterbacks. They have 2 options at that position. So they don't really need to draft the quarterback. And then, of course, that leaves the Raiders at pick 6. There's a chance that Shedeur Sanders is actually there with pick 6. And I want you guys to think back. There were times when Patrick Mahomes was coming out, and he was not the number 1 overall pick, and teams didn't mortgage the future to jump up for Patrick Mahomes. The Chiefs ended up trading up, which was true, but it was a solid trade up for them where they didn't overly, give up a ton of picks, and they kind of let him fall to pick 10, and they took him. You look at guys like Lamar Jackson, right? The Ravens just kind of sat back and he fell, and towards the end of the draft, they jumped back into the first round and they took Lamar Jackson. I think they jumped back up. Don't quote me on that. But they took Lamar Jackson, right? They just kind of waited. Like, they didn't mortgage their future. And what Vincent's saying here, there's a lot of sense to this, right? Because we've seen over the past couple of years specifically, right? We saw the Panthers trade all the way up to the number 1 overall pick to go all in, try to get Bryce Young. They, quote unquote, mortgage their future to jump up to potentially get that guy. We've seen other teams kind of do it over the past couple of years as well, where they trade up to get that quarterback. And it doesn't always work out, right? Especially if you end up drafting a guy that does not work out. Or it's a guy that's not legit, right? The Niners kind of did this as well with Trey Lance. It's interesting because the Raiders could be in a position where Shedeur Sanders does naturally fall to them with the 6th overall pick. And if it's not Shedeur, maybe it's Jackson Dart or one of these other quarterbacks, Jalen Milroe. Would it be smart for the Raiders to say, hey, we have the 6th overall pick. If Shedeur is there, right, we're not trading up to the number 1, number 2 overall pick. We're not giving up 3 first-round picks. Would it be smart for the Raiders to go with that quarterback at the 6th overall pick? Because I'm confident we're only going to get 1 quarterback off the board, right? I'm fairly confident in that. So with that, would it actually be a good strategy for the Raiders to just sit and pick and take the best quarterback? Because what that means is, yes, we obviously have our current quarterback right now in Geno Smith, and he's locked in for this season. And then even the second season, Geno Smith's going to be guaranteed $18 million. You could release him. You only lose $18 million, right? You're not losing 40 or 50 or 60. You're only losing $18 million. But would it be smart for the Raiders to say, hey, we're going to go in with Shedeur Sanders this season, or we're going to draft him. We'll let Geno Smith start for this season. We'll open up the battle in his second season, in Shedeur Sanders specifically. And if he wins out, great. If not, Geno's the starter. And then in that third year, we'll fully commit to Shedeur. He'll be our quarterback in that third year, and that's 2 years of him developing under Chip Kelly, right? Like, would that be a smart strategy? Right? I just think it's an interesting statement by Vincent Bonsignore, and it's something that I didn't really think much about. To me, the quarterback position is one of those positions where if you have a great offensive coordinator, your quarterback's going to be good, right? The actual quarterback does not really matter. It's the coordinator, the guy that's designing the plays, right? And, offensive coordinators don't matter if your head coach is the offensive coordinator, if he's the play caller, then your offensive coordinator doesn't matter. But the guy that matters is the guy that's designing the offense and he's calling the plays, right? To me, that guy is always going to be the most important. There's a reason why you can get Kyle Shanahan to take Jimmy G to the Super Bowl. There's a reason why he can then switch quarterbacks to Brock Purdy and he's getting him to the Super Bowl, right? There's a reason why, Andy Reid can go from quarterback to quarterback to quarterback and find success, right? There's a reason why we've seen guys that are great offense coordinators. Sean McVay takes Jared Goff to the Super Bowl. Ben Johnson takes Jared Goff to, multiple winning seasons. And then without the two best offensive coordinators, Jared Goff's like 0-16, right? To me, offensive coordinators matter so much. And, the Raiders do have Chip Kelly. And if Chip Kelly felt like, hey, we can have success with Shedeur, I'd be okay with taking him with the 6th overall pick. But I do think it's also smarter if you feel like Shedeur's not worth the 6th overall pick and there's development that he'd have to take. I think it makes sense just to go with a guy like Membou or, Travis Hunter could potentially fall as well, especially given, if we do get 2 quarterbacks that do end up going. And then let's say the Patriots want an offensive tackle and they go with Membou, right? I do think Membou is the best tackle. He'll be the first tackle taken. Even with 2 quarterbacks and Membou taken, there's a chance Will Johnson goes in the top 6. Bill Carter will go in the top 6. There's a chance that the Raiders do end up getting, a guy like Travis Hunter, which, I'd be so shocked if they happen. But I would love for the Raiders to potentially go down that route. But we'll see what ends up happening, right? And we got another interesting story that kind of came out a couple days back. Pat McAfee had Ashton Jeanty on his show. I think this was yesterday specifically. And Ashton Jeanty basically confirmed that the Las Vegas Raiders took Ashton Jeanty as well as a couple other of the top draft prospects to Topgolf, right? They went to Topgolf and they hung out. If you guys remember, the Washington Commanders went viral last year for taking Jaden Daniels, and I believe it was his mother as well. But they took Jaden Daniels to Topgolf, and people were like, what kind of top 30 visit is that, right? Where a team is taking a player, not into the film room, not into the facilities to meet some of the players, but to Topgolf, right? And some people will criticize that a little bit. But the Raiders took that same approach this year, right? They took a couple different guys. Ashton Jeanty said that in the group were guys like Michigan defensive tackle Mason Graham, LSU offensive tackle Will Campbell, quarterback Jackson Dart, Texas quarterback Quinn Ewers, and Ohio State quarterback Will Howard. And of course, Michigan outside linebacker Josiah Stewart. That one's kind of interesting. Of course, Ashton Jeanty was with them as well. So the Raiders ended up bringing in a couple of these draft prospects, and they took them to Topgolf, right? So that's kind of interesting in its own right, that John Spytek isn't doing what the general team kind of does, right? Most teams are bringing these guys in. They're taking them into the facilities. They're giving them a tour of the facilities. They're trying to sell the Raiders to some of these teams, right? Also have to realize that down the line, these guys are going to become free agents. So with guys that have to develop a little bit, right? Mason Graham as a great example. Mason Graham in his first 4 years will not be as good as he will be in his next 4 years, right? Years 5 through 8, right? He'll probably be a lot better. He'll develop. He'll be a free agent potentially, right? So teams do try to sell these guys as well on the facilities and those type of things. At least that's what historically teams have kind of done, but the Raiders are one of the few teams that are kind of changing it up. They're going down that entertainment route. Let's take these guys out, show them a good time, which is kind of interesting, right? Nothing surprising about the guys that they kind of brought in that group specifically. Although Josiah Stewart to me is kind of interesting. Stewart's like 6 feet. He's super, super small. He might be 6'1", but he's super small as an outside linebacker. He's a pass rusher, not a true linebacker in the stacked position. Again, it's just kind of interesting if you guys ask me that the Raiders are bringing him in on a top 30 visit. But he is a talented football player, so we'll see how that kind of happens. And there was one other update that I want to just kind of get into. Ian Rappaport said that William and Mary offensive lineman Charles Grant finished his 7-team tour with the Falcons and Raiders, likely the second highest drafted FCS player after Andy SU's Gray Zabel. I want to talk about this a little bit. Not that the Raiders obviously met with Charles Grant. That part of it is not important, right? Because we all have already known this for a while. The Raiders were going to meet with Charles Grant. But the fact that Ian Rappaport is saying that the Falcons were one of the teams that met with Charles Grant. I want to try connecting a couple of dots here for you guys, right? So, obviously most NFL teams value players very, very similarly, right? If Will Levis is a guy where us fans are like, he's a top 5 pick, but let's say the teams picking in the top 5 don't value Will Levis as a top 5 pick, chances are pretty much the entire NFL doesn't value him as a top 5 pick. And if you're picking at 27 and Will Levis is there, chances are you don't want him because you don't value him as that type of guy, right? Most teams agree on prospects. If teams feel like, hey, Darnell Wright is one of the best offensive tackles coming out, and they value him as their first or second offensive tackle, chances are most teams value Darnell Wright the same exact way, right? My point in saying that is just if teams are bringing guys in and they're valuing them at a certain position, most teams kind of generally agree with that, right? These teams have way more insight into players than what we have, right? And it's important to recognize that the Falcons are bringing in Charles Grant because people don't really know, is Charles Grant going to play guard or tackle? We don't really know, right? Obviously, he plays left tackle at William & Mary, but some people think he'll actually transition better to a guard. Now, it's important because when the Falcons are bringing in Charles Grant, that tells us what NFL teams think of him. The Falcons don't need guards. The Falcons have Chris Lindstrom, who's a top 5 guard at the right guard position. They have Matthew Bergeron at the left guard position, who I think he just finished his second year. He was a second-round pick as well. He's about to enter year 3, and he's legit, right? It's not a guy that you need to replace. Like Matthew Bergeron's, he would be the Raiders' best guard, right? He's a good offensive lineman. Bergeron has 2 years left. He's not a guy that they're replacing, so they're scheduling a visit with Charles Grant when they don't need guards because the Falcons, I think, value Charles Grant as an offensive tackle, which is important context because that means the Raiders probably value him as an offensive tackle as well. And, when you're bringing in Will Campbell, when there's reports that the Raiders are seriously considering Armand Membou, that means there's a chance they're considering Charles Grant as well. And the thing is I think Charles Grant's a first-round pick, right? His tape speaks for itself. Now, it's unfortunate that Charles Grant did not get to play at the Senior Bowl, right? I think he had like an injury that ended up happening in I think it was the final game of the season. So he ended up not being able to go to the Senior Bowl and actually put the tape out there. But the thing is we've also heard the Raiders are interested in trading down, right? They're interested in potentially moving down. And I think if the Raiders do move down, they're going to miss out on Membou. And I think there's a chance that Charles Grant's arguably their second offensive tackle on their board. And I wouldn't disagree with that. Honestly, I think based off the tape, and again, it is at William & Mary, so you'd have to kind of factor that in. I do think Charles Grant is, one of the top 3 or 4 offensive tackles in this class. Charles Grant, Armand Membou, Josh Simmons are probably 3 of the top 4 guys for me. Kelvin Banks is right there as well. I think there's a chance that the Raiders are actually interested in Charles Grant, potentially in the first round, if we traded back. So, to me, it was just an interesting report, and I read it as the Raiders value him potentially as an offensive tackle as well, because the Falcons do. We'll see what ends up happening, right? It's going to be a very, very, very interesting draft. Less than 10 days away from the draft actually being here. I think we're, 8 days away from the actual draft, and, the Raiders are going to, their entire team changes in about 8 to 10 days, right? From the first round through the draft, right? The second round, the third round are equally just as important. I'm sorry, day 2 and day 3 are just equally as important. So, the Raiders team and roster is going to change a lot. And I'm here for it, man. I really do think the Raiders have a solid team. And I do think that, if you just hit on that running back, the wide receiver, and guard positions, where you just get those 3 positions, based off the team that we have on paper, this team can make a playoff push, right? And think about this. If you get a wide receiver like Travis Hunter in the first round, right, that's a difference maker day 1, right? We've seen Brian Thomas Jr., we've seen Malik Neighbors, we've seen guys like Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase come in rookie years, and they're difference makers. I think Travis Hunter has that potential day 1, right? So let's say you get Travis Hunter with that 6th overall pick. We've seen running backs come in on day 2 and be instant superstars, right? Or instant starting caliber players. Nick Chubb is a great example of this. 2nd round pick comes in. Jonathan Taylor, 2nd round pick comes in. And these guys dominate for 5, 6, 7 years. So in the first round, you can get that wide receiver. In the second round, you can get that running back. And then in the third round, you can get an elite guard, right? Matthew Bergeron was a middle of the second round pick, right? He's a solid ass guard. We've seen other guys as well. I think Chris Lindstrom may have been a third round pick. Don't quote me on that. But we've seen so many guys. Jackson Powers Johnson go second round. Last year, Cooper Beebe, the Cowboys took him in the third round, right? He's a really, really, really good interior offensive lineman. You can give a first, second, third round starting caliber players at the positions that the Raiders have needs at, right? So if the Raiders are able to get this right over the next couple of 10, 11, 12 days, our team can look so much different and we can actually be in position to compete. So we'll see what ends up happening, man. Let me know what you guys think. Thumbs up, subscribe, and I will see you guys next time with another video.